My true story. From Arizona, I ate alone on my 80th birthday while my family vacationed in Las Vegas with my retirement money. They called it a break. I called it betrayal. My daughter smirked. "Mom, you should know your place so we can have nice memories. With you sitting there, people will think you're a wax statue. Vegas is fun. You're a responsibility. We only chose one." Those words cut deeper than any blade the day I turned 80. I was in the kitchen, setting 5 little candles on a store-bought loaf of bread I'd found at the local bakery. Gingerbread, my favorite flavor since childhood. No cake, no party, no fanfare. Just a quiet kitchen, my trembling hands, and a plate with a slice waiting for me. I pressed the matches to light the candles, and as they flickered, I tried to imagine I was blowing out a single flame of sorrow. In the next room, my phone buzzed. I picked it up and saw pictures of my family. My face replaced by the blue waters of a Las Vegas pool, by neon lights and clinking glasses. My daughter, her husband, my grandchildren, sun-shaded and smiling, no gray hairs, no wrinkles, no me. I listened to their laughter in a group video, the kind of laugh that echoes in a villa, floats out over golden cards spread on a table somewhere, and bolts my breath straight out of me. My grandchildren said, "Look, Grandma, this is how adults have fun." I took a small bite of the gingerbread. No one was telling me to stop. No one was urging me to speak. The candles trembled, as if they missed having a mother to protect them. I stared at the flame, and tears gathered behind my eyes, but the tears refused to fall. I reminded myself I was stronger than that. I was 80. I had lost count of how many years I had worked, saved, and scrimped to make this day happen, and yet I was eating alone. They had said it would be fine if I stayed home. They said they were just giving themselves a break, but I knew exactly why. A week ago, my son John had said on the phone, "Mom, don't worry. Use the money we set aside for your birthday for groceries or something. We're going to Las Vegas to celebrate." I had thought he meant he was taking me. They had taken it all. My retirement account, safe and untouched for decades, had funded their flights, their stay, their entertainment. And I was left with a loaf of bread and my own hollow apartment. Silence settled over the kitchen like a thick blanket. I finished my slice of gingerbread, swallowing every crumb of bitterness. I did not cry, even though my heart pounded loud enough to feel like thunder in my ears. Instead, I lit a cup of tea and placed it next to my plate with the remaining candles. Then I opened their group video again. They were singing happy birthday, but the words came out false. The grandchildren were trying to look sincere, but the pool reflected only excitement for the water, not for me. I closed the phone and heard my own voice whisper, "Happy birthday, Mom." It echoed back at me, empty and distant. I looked at the candles. Their warmth was comforting and cruel. Warm because they reminded me I was alive. Cruel because I was alone. I watched until the flames flickered out one by one, until the last candle hissed itself to death. That was the moment I knew. I knew that for all the love I had given, for all the meals I had cooked and temples I had prayed in, my family had chosen my money over me. They had withheld their presence to build memories without the one person who had built every memory they had ever had. The betrayal throbbed in my chest like a pulse. And so I stood up. I cleared the plate and poured the tea. I walked to the window and watched the orange sunset drape across the horizon, tires of Vegas calling to them with neon promise, while I was left with dusk and a single empty chair. I didn't cry. Tears would have been weakness. This was the day I discovered I was not just forgotten. My life savings were being spent by those who claimed to love me, while I withered in my own kitchen. I turned away from the window. I knew exactly what I would do next. I would not allow them to spend one more dime of my retirement without acknowledging me. This betrayal had cost me more than money. It had cost me dignity. It had cost me presence. But it would not cost me justice. They called it a break. I called it betrayal, and if they thought I would stay silent, they were wrong. I worked through smoke and sweat for 40 years, 40 Christmases without a tree some years. 40 summers with a window fan instead of air conditioning. I was never glamorous, but I was dependable. I was never praised, but I was always present. I began working when I was 16, first as a dishwasher in a diner, then as a cleaner at a textile mill. later folding sheets and scrubbing tiles at a chain hotel off the interstate. I never complained. I never called in sick. I was the kind of worker who knew the names of people's kids but was forgotten the moment I clocked out. I never married, never adopted, never asked for help. I raised John on my own, and every time he needed something, I found a way. If he needed shoes, I skipped lunch. If he needed a field trip, I mopped floors late into the night. When college came, he said, "Mom, I'll figure it out," but I sold my wedding ring, my mother's ring, to help him register. When I finally retired, I had saved enough to feel safe. Not rich, but safe. I opened a small retirement account, watched it grow over the years like a garden I had planted in silence. I did not travel. I did not spend. I put every extra dollar away. At 68, when the aches started creeping into my joints and my eyes stopped adjusting to night driving, I said goodbye to my last job as a lunch lady at the local middle school. They gave me a balloon and a card. No pension, just good wishes. That was fine. I had the account. I told John about it over dinner. I still remember the way his eyes lit up. "Mom," he said, "you should let me help manage it. Make sure no one takes advantage of you. I can handle the online stuff. You just enjoy retirement." I believed him. I handed over the login, the passwords. I even switched the statements to his email. I thought it would be easier, less for me to worry about. And for a while, I did not worry. Every time I asked how it looked, he'd say, "Still growing, Mom. You're all good." I trusted that. I trusted him. I trusted the boy I carried to the emergency room at 2 a.m. when he split his chin open. The boy I sat beside for 3 nights straight during a high fever. The boy who used to fall asleep with his head in my lap while I hummed him through bad dreams. So when I looked at my own retirement summary one quiet Sunday afternoon, when I finally asked for paper statements again, I was shocked to see the numbers had dipped. Not catastrophically, but noticeably. Instead of slow, steady growth, I saw quiet, careful withdrawals. Small ones at first, a few $100s every few months, then more frequent, bigger amounts. They were labeled as family expenses. I called John. He sounded relaxed, casual. "Oh, that's for a few family things," he said. "Car repairs, some medical bills, flights." "Flights?" I asked. "Flights for what?" He laughed. "Relax, Mom, you're not broke. We're just using the money a little, temporarily." I sat down at my kitchen table and stared at the statement in my hand. I remembered every mop handle, every stack of dishes, every late-night shift on aching feet, and all of it had slowly turned into someone else's vacation fund. I asked him when he planned to repay it. He said, "It's not really about repayment, Mom. We're family. What's yours is ours." And that was the moment it clicked, not just the money, but the truth. I had worked my body to the bone, so someone else could take selfies in casinos and call it love. The savings I had built, not for cruises, not for indulgences, but for peace, had become their escape plan. And I was the one left behind, watching the balance fall like dust through open fingers. They had not stolen it all at once. They had sipped it slowly, and I handed them the cup. On the morning of my 80th birthday, I woke before dawn. The sun was still climbing behind the desert hills when I decided to bake a pumpkin cake, the one thing I had always loved since I was a child, back when autumn meant more than just dust and heat. I measured the spices carefully, whispered thank yous with each sift of cinnamon and nutmeg, and shaped the batter into a pan I had used for years. I remembered pressing the edges with my fingertips and thinking, "This cake will be for me. This one gift is just for me." While the oven warmed, I cleared the table in the corner of my kitchen. No fancy linen, just the table I'd bought secondhand after John graduated, a sturdy piece that had seen homework scribbles, birthday candles, heartbreak, and hope. I placed the cake in the center. Then I added a vase with 3 white daisies I purchased that morning, stems fresh and hopeful. I lit a small lamp in the room, enough to chase away the shadows but not bright enough to signal party lights. It felt like home. By mid-morning, the cake was ready. I spread a thin layer of cream cheese frosting, dusted it with cinnamon, and placed a single candle in the center. It glowed gently. I sat down across from it and took a deep breath as I struck a match. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered aloud, more to the candle than to myself. Then my phone buzzed. The message tone felt jarring in the silver sunlit quiet. I picked it up and saw my daughter's name, Heather, floating on the screen. Look, she had captioned a photo she sent. Her and John, side by the Las Vegas Bellagio fountains, my grandchildren laughing as water shot over their heads and glittered. The next message was a video. Inside a shining resort lobby, the chandeliers were neon brighter than the Arizona sun, and laughter thundered through the speaker. Heather's voice echoed, "Dad and I are about to hit the slots." I set the phone down. No greeting, no mention of birthday, no mention of me. Just pictures and the sound of leisure I had financed, without permission, without presence. I picked up the plate and cut a small slice, only a sliver, but it felt like more than I deserved. I carried it to the table and sat, knife in hand, carved through each soft bite with ceremony. It tasted of memories, childhood autumn pies, Sunday church dinners, family meals with all of us around the table. I swallowed each bite with care, savoring the richness and mourning the absence of company. Another buzz. This time, the grandchildren. A video call. I lifted the phone and said, "Hello, Grandma is eating cake." Little Emma, my 6-year-old granddaughter, appeared. She tapped the screen joyfully and said in that sing-song voice, "Happy lonely birthday, Grandma." And then all of them started giggling, Dad, Mom, Uncle Matt. Their laughter rattled through my ears like a cold wind. I blinked back a million unshed tears. I said nothing. I tried to smile, but laughter and kindness drowned out by their mocking tone. "Thank you, sweetheart," I whispered to Emma. Then I pressed end. I returned to my slice of cake, its sweetness ruined by the bitter aftertaste of abandonment. The daisies dropped slightly in the vase. The candle sputtered near its end. I thought back to John's words. Use what we set aside for your birthday. We're just taking a break. A break. How careless, how familiar. I had heard that word countless times. Break. Break from chores, break from expectations. This time, a break from the woman who raised them. I examined the crumbs on my plate. Each one was a tiny testament to my limitations. I had done everything, sacrificed my body, my money, my future. I had prepped dinners, tucked them into bed, nursed fevers, patched scraped knees, helped with homework. I had held them through storms, literally and figuratively. I had taught them good manners and braced them against bad ones. I had cheered for their opposing teams just so they'd feel seen. I had given them everything. And yet here I sat, alone with a cake no one would eat with me. There was no ache like this, no broken bone or scraped hand had ever hurt as much. The quiet kitchen, once filled with voices, now felt like an echo chamber of loss. The daisies drooped more. The candle flame shook as if shivering from fear. I wanted to bury my face in my hands, but I didn't. I folded my napkin neatly instead. I drank my tea. My mind wandered back to when Emma was born. I remembered the cold January morning, the heat lamps, the nurses cooing. I remembered holding that tiny human and promising myself I would never let her down. I had kept that promise. Not once had I failed. Not once had I taken advantage. I had taken each penny, each moment, and turned it into something good for them. But they had taken mine and turned it into Vegas lights. As the candle burned low, I did something I had not done in decades. I stood up and walked across the kitchen. I knelt by the table. I closed my eyes. I didn't breathe. I listened. I took in this moment, this aloneness, and held it as a witness to my own dignity, to my own worth. When I opened my eyes, I blew the candle out. Thick smoke rose, blanketing the tiny room in a momentary veil. It felt like a blessing, or a curse, maybe both. I cleared the plate. I washed the few dishes. I wiped the table until it shone. I returned to my chair. I picked up the phone, unlocked statements online, and stared at the numbers again. They had dropped another $3,000 this week. In 2 years, nearly half the account had disappeared. But none of it mattered as much as the knowledge that I had been left alone to eat cake on the only day I mattered. I finished the cake slice, then ate one more, then a third, just to remind myself I had control. They didn't decide when I ate. I did. I lit a fresh candle, even though the sun was still useful. I let its flame burn for a while, not for celebration, but for memory, for mourning, for the promise that I would not disappear quietly into their memories either. That night, I wrapped the cake leftovers and placed them in the fridge. I wrote in my journal. They call it a vacation. I call it erasing my birthday. Shame on them. I went to bed early, bundled in blankets. I did not cry. I seldom cried. Instead, I lay still and let resolution settle in, like a stone finding its place. I had baked a cake for me, ate it for me. That moment, that choice, was mine, and tomorrow I would ask questions, hard questions. Questions about money, about respect, about what happens when your life savings become someone else's holiday fund. I would not be invisible, not anymore. They might have taken the candles from my table, but they could not take the fire that still burned inside me. I awoke the next morning with the taste of cinnamon and ache of betrayal still lingering in my mouth. I couldn't sleep, not after yesterday's revelations. So I made tea and sat in my favorite armchair by the window, the faint glow of dawn filtering through dusty blinds. I stared at the silence, feeling it press against me. Then I picked up the phone and dialed my son's number. It rang 3 times before he answered. There was noise in the background. Traffic? Hotel lounge music? I couldn't tell. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was casual, the same as always, as if nothing had changed. "John," I said, "can you tell me the name of the bank where the retirement account is held?" He paused. I could almost hear him weighing his words. "Mom, can we not do this today? We're on vacation." "A vacation you used my money for," I replied, and kept my voice steady. "I need the account number." He sighed, loud enough for me to hear. A pause. "Mom," he said, "just listen. We're only gone for a week. The account is fine. I will send you a statement." I closed my eyes. That statement, the one that had upset me to the core. I wanted to feel safe, but all I saw was my life being drained piece by piece. "John," I said again, firmer, "where is the money I saved?" "What money, Mom?" he asked. "It's your retirement account. We just used a bit for a trip." I felt my pulse tighten. "Used how much?" He hesitated this time. "Mom, like 3,000 total, for flights, room, meals at the resort, spa packages. It was our treat to ourselves. But it's fine. You'll get it back when we get home, no big deal." My voice was calm, too calm. "That money isn't yours to spend. It is if we're family," he said. I clenched the phone. I'd heard that line before, "What's mine is ours." But the reality felt like, what's mine is gone, and I'm the one left behind. "Are you going to give it back?" I asked. "Soon?" He laughed. "Mom, relax. You're 80. You should enjoy something for once. A massage in your seat would help you understand." I took a breath. My vision narrowed to the phone. I thought of crumbs of pumpkin cake and the laughter I never heard. I thought of those neon pictures flashing on my screen as though I were a ghost haunting their joy. "I want the money back," I said softly. He was silent a moment. "Give us a break, okay?" That was his final word before he hung up. A break. Later in the morning, I sat at my desk and waited. I resisted the urge to call the bank myself. I had, after all, given them the information. But I wanted to hear it from the horse's mouth. About 2 hours later, the phone rang. It was the bank. The voice was polite. A woman in a neatly clipped tone said, "Hello, Mrs. Rogers. This is Blue Desert Bank. I'm calling about your retirement account." I felt my pulse picking up. "Yes?" "Well, ma'am," she said, "there's been recent account activity that triggered a security protocol. A number of large withdrawals from locations far from your home. We've temporarily suspended access to prevent potential fraud." I stared at the phone. Suspended. Frozen. She continued, "You will not be able to use debit cards, make transfers, or withdraw funds at this time. This is reversible, but requires your verification in person, either at a branch or via notarized documentation." My throat went dry. So there I sat, phone pressed to my ear, words swimming in the room. I thought of her calling me older, unreliable. I thought of him laughing about my age, and now this. "Okay," I said, voice barely a whisper. "What do I need to do?" She recited the steps. I wrote them down. Then she said, "I'm sorry for the inconvenience, ma'am. You should be able to resolve this when you return to town. This is a common procedure." I thanked her and hung up. The silence in the room came crashing in. The bank had taken action. My money was out of reach, not gone but unreachable. Like me, I moved to the window again and looked outside. The sky was a pale blue, the sun warm. But I felt cold. Someone had blocked my account, not for my protection, but for someone else's gain. The nerve of them to call it inconvenience. I counted the steps it would take to get to the nearest branch. 50 yards. Yet I wondered if I had the strength to walk them. My throat felt thick, heavy. That afternoon I tried dealing with small things. I wrote notes for groceries. I thought of errands, but each time I picked up the phone, my mood changed. I dropped it again. Then I found the old journal tucked in a drawer, the one I wrote in when I celebrated my 60th birthday, in the same kitchen, with hearty chocolate cake and laughter swirling inside. I opened it and found the entry from 20 years ago. I had written, "Today I celebrate a life I built from my own 2 hands." I closed the book, because today at 80 I was still celebrating, but the foundation was shaking. I remembered something else. I had not transferred legal ownership of the account. I had let my son manage it, but I was still the account holder, the beneficiary, the one who signed every form. That meant I still had options. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I reached for the phone again, but this time I called the law offices of Carter and Hughes in Phoenix. I remembered Mrs. Carter had once introduced herself at a church meeting and offered pro bono help to seniors. I remembered the words on her business card. Advocates for Dignity. When the receptionist came on the line, I said, "I need to make an appointment. It concerns account fraud and elder neglect." She was kind, urgent, setting a time for a consultation within 2 days. I hung up and looked at the clock. 2 days. As though I had planted a seed that would sprout. I stood up, walked to the fridge, opened it, and stared at the leftover cake. I closed it and turned away. I returned to the window and watched the afternoon sun dip. There I remained, breathing in the knowledge that I had snapped something back, my quiet determination. They thought it would be just a week. They thought it was their money. They thought I was 80 and old, but here I was, older and wiser. At dusk, I lit a single candle and sat with my tea. I no longer felt like a woman who had lost something. I felt like a woman who had woken up, and tomorrow I would go to the bank. I would prove my identity. I would give evidence. I would secure my money. And if the lines in the contract had cracks, I would widen them with legal counsel. I would not be forgotten again. They had locked me out. But it was they who would remain locked out when I found the key. That evening, I sat in the dim light of my kitchen, phone in hand, staring at the contract I had signed decades ago with the bank. I reread every paragraph, every clause, searching for the small print that would give me power back. I had already contacted the lawyer in Phoenix, and his voice had been firm and steady. "Mrs. Rogers, we will request an immediate investigation into irregular account withdrawals. We need any evidence you have." I found it then. The voice memo I had recorded 3 weeks ago. Without them knowing, during a family FaceTime when Heather was unplugged from the camera but still visible. Her words were sharp and cruel, but she thought no one was listening. I pressed play on the recording, and I heard her say, "Mom is dirty, outdated, and needy. She's an embarrassment. Going to Vegas with Dad will help us forget her." The way she said, "dirty," made my stomach churn. And then, "It's just better without her." She, thought I could be erased. I listened to it twice, tears threatening to fall. Then I pressed delete. I would not cry in this kitchen tonight. I would be prepared. The lawyer called back, telling me to gather all records and to meet the next day in Phoenix. He said the bank would need a formal affidavit and supporting material. He told me to expect backlash, resistance. Families don't often weaponize money against one another. But I wasn't in most families. The next morning, my lawyer, Mr. Carter, called the bank and requested a precautionary hold on any further withdrawals. He explained that Mrs. Rogers suspected elder financial abuse. The bank complied. They froze the account, but said the money remained secure. Then the paperwork began. They asked for a copy of the recording. I sent it. They asked for a statement detailing when and how I discovered the withdrawals. I wrote it out. The day I asked John, the sums I saw, the final straw. I described their trip to Las Vegas and the detail that it had been paid for using account funds. And then came the first email from Heather, her tone defensive. "We thought that was our money. We don't know why you're making such a big deal." We saw it as family. Mom, I'm sorry you feel attacked. I forwarded the email to Mr. Carter. He replied, "This is standard. One side offers empathy. We need facts." That evening, the bank called again. They informed us that the recorded sample and affidavits had triggered their internal fraud department, meaning they would hold the funds indefinitely until a final decision was made or legal judgment reached. I exhaled. For now, I was safe. But I had more to do. I went to the basement and pulled out a shoebox labeled Letters to M. Inside were birthday cards, school programs, receipts, photographs. I took photos of me teaching her to ride a bike, of us at church, of me cradling her while she slept during a fever. I gathered them in a folder to hand to the lawyer. Documentation of my lifelong presence, my sacrifice, and the foundation of our family. The next day, we met. Mr. Carter looked through the photos, nodded. He carefully threaded into his briefcase the printed transcript of the recording, the bank statements, and a timeline of my requests. "Next step," he said, "is the provisional hearing. They will want to argue that the withdrawals were consensual and the temporary freeze will likely be extended. You just need to show they breached trust and that you were coerced by family expectation." He paused, looking at me. "Do you feel ready to come forward if this goes public?" I thought about the night I ate cake alone. I thought about those daisies. I thought about voice memos hidden in the shadows. "I'm ready," I whispered. A week later, I was inside a courtroom for the provisional hearing. The judge looked older than I was, steady and quiet. Opposing counsel spoke for the family. They said the withdrawals were used for family expenses with implied consent. They said I loved them. They said that John and Heather believed they were preserving memories for all of us. I stood quietly to one side. When it was my turn, Mr. Carter asked me to describe the withdrawals. I told the judge. They took the money without asking. They didn't tell me the date or purpose of the Las Vegas trip. I didn't mind helping until I discovered it online. I had no idea how much had been withdrawn until I saw it diminishing week by week. I handed the judge the recording transcript. He held it quietly, then asked the bailiff to play the audio. Heather's voice floated through the courtroom, cold, casual, demeaning. Mom is dirty, outdated, needy, her throat closed, but she had to stay silent while her own words filled the room. When the recording ended, I looked up. Heather's face was pale, John's eyes went to the floor. I felt a burst of relief, like light through dark clouds. Judge Brooks leaned forward. "Thank you for the clarity. Based on the motion and the audio, this court orders a continued freeze on the account. The bank must hold the funds until a full hearing. Additionally, a guardian ad litem will be appointed to represent Mrs. Rogers' interests, if necessary." The judge's gavel echoed. The account remained frozen. Outside the courtroom, cameras and reporters awaited. A few asked questions. I shook my head. I gave no statement. Not yet. That afternoon, I sent a copy of the hearing transcript and documentation to the state attorney's office, asking for a review of potential elder financial abuse. I wanted to see justice. Not just recovery of money, but recognition of wrongdoing. My children called later, Heather texted. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize you'd feel hurt." John left voicemails, more pleading than defensive. "Mom, please don't take this too far. We can pay you back." But I didn't answer. Not yet. That night I sat in my kitchen again. The cake was gone, long forgotten. The daisies wilted, but on the counter lay the photos and papers intact, like witness to my life. I poured a cup of tea and felt my heart settle into a kind of stillness, like the moment after a storm when the air tastes different. I had asked a question. I had sounded my cry, and the law had answered. I did not feel sweet. I did not feel triumphant. But I felt heard. They thought I could be erased, but I had the evidence. And I had the courage to use it. That night, I slept deeper than before. Justice, I realized, is not always a grand firework. It is a steady flame. When the news headline came across my feed, 80-year-old Arizona grandma abandoned for Vegas trip, I felt a peculiar surge of validation. That morning, reporters arrived at my front gate, cameras poised, microphones extended. They asked nothing of me. They simply thanked me for sharing the truth. They called me a voice for women like me, grandparents cut out of their own lives. The hashtag Forgotten Moms began climbing the charts. It wasn't just local, it was national. Twitter lit up with stories. My mother was left alone for a cruise. I spent my mother's Christmas money on my wedding. Thousands of tweets later, I realized this wasn't just my story anymore, it was our story. Commenters called it a betrayal. Others used stronger words, words I wouldn't use but knew sitting quietly in my home that they echoed my own thoughts. Entitled, selfish, heartless. It hurt in a certain way, because it wasn't just them. They represented a growing number of adult children who lost sight of their mother's worth once age eclipsed novelty. That afternoon my phone rang. It was Heather. She sounded defensive. "Mom, the press is saying terrible things." "Yes," I said softly. "We had no idea it would go this way." "Well, maybe you should have thought then." She paused. Then came John's email. "Mom, we are transferring the full amount back, plus extra for penalties and the legal fees." It arrived the next morning. The amount was large enough to make my eyebrows rise. The sum matched every withdrawal plus an added 5%. I knew banks would charge, but seeing it in numbers, small digits turning red, felt like closure. It felt like recognition. That same day, I received a call from the bank. "Your account has been credited. You have full access." I logged in. The balance was whole again. I closed the browser tab and walked outside, letting the sun warm me. The next day, through news outlets, they released the statements Heather and John had made on camera. They admitted to treating me like a burden. Heather said, "We thought our mother wouldn't mind. That money was just there." John echoed it, adding, "She's old. She won't understand." They looked sweaty and smaller in their own clip. I sat in a quiet chair and watched them say it. Their words made me ache, not for them, but for who they had shown themselves to be. A few days later, I learned the bank had attempted to debit the money they withdrew from their card, even while they were still in Vegas. Their credit line was maxed. They called customer service, embarrassed to say why. I smiled when I heard that detail, Vegas glamour and all, and they ran out of money there. That was my reckoning. They had no cash for taxis or tips. They had to ask a third party to wire money for the rest of their trip home. Their vacation, paid for with my dignity, ended short and broke. I did not gloat, I just acknowledged. I accepted a local invitation to speak at a women's luncheon, mostly retirees like myself. They called it A Mother's Voice. I sat in front of a long table of smiling faces, all nodding as I spoke about boundaries, dignity, self-worth. I remembered the gingerbread and daisies, the quiet betrayal, and I ended by saying, family is not an entitlement. Respect is a gift, and when we lose respect, we lose each other. Applause followed. I closed my eyes for a moment and let the warmth roll over me. Walking home that day, I felt lighter, not because I had restored my bank balance, but because the record had been set straight. People saw me as more than a forgotten figure. They saw me as a mother who wouldn't be erased. That night, as I sank into bed, I realized something profound. Getting your money back is one thing. Getting your place back is another. They may have called me outdated and burdensome, but the world had already decided I was something more. They came back late one evening. I knew they were home long before I saw them, because the desert air stopped being quiet and filled with the sounds of a car door, footsteps crunching on gravel, and distant voices calling my name. "Mom! Mom!" I had prepared for this. Long before they left, I deleted my old phone number, blocked their messages. I had no intention of welcoming them back so easily. I had restored what was mine, my account, my savings, my sense of self. If they wanted more, they would have to ask, and I was no longer at their beck and call. I looked out the living room window and saw them standing on the walkway, my son, his face drawn and unshaven, my daughter close behind, wringing her hands. The grandchildren trailing behind like startled birds. They looked small under the porch light. I watched them silently for a moment. The house was silent behind me, no doorbell chimed. I didn't move. They stood there for what felt like forever. My daughter finally spoke, her voice tentative and low. "Mom, we want to apologize." Her lips trembled. The grandchildren shuffled their feet, but I did not open the door, because justice isn't always delivered in words. After several minutes, I pressed a button by my door and the porch light turned off, then flickered back on as a cover letter appeared, pinned under the doormat. I watched as my daughter stooped to pick it up. Her husband's arms encircled her. I looked away until she stepped back. Then I walked toward the doorway, picked up the letter. and read it. Mom, we're sorry. We thought we were doing right by you. We didn't know how much it hurt. Please forgive us. I folded it once, twice, neatly, and stepped away, leaving it open-faced on the kitchen island. That night, I wrote my own reply on a lined envelope and slipped it outside their car tire before they could leave. Inside it, 3 lines. That money was mine. You had no right to take it. I do not hate Vegas. I hate your silence. I have donated it all to the Forgotten Mothers Fund. I did not ask for forgiveness. I didn't want to thank you. I did want acknowledgement and truth. At dawn the next day, I drove to the bank and authorized the final withdrawal. The entire remaining balance, over $50,000, disappeared from my account. It moved neatly into a charity I had established a few evenings before, the Forgotten Mothers Fund. It became my legacy, a seed planted in desert soil for women who had been overlooked or abandoned in their later years. I returned home and saw, through the window, my son stepping out of his car, his eyes red. He held a small bouquet of daisies, the same flowers I once used to decorate my table. He shuffled to the front door and pressed the button to ring. The buzzer sounded. I didn't answer. He let the bouquet drop on the porch and walked away, head bowed. My daughter joined him. The grandchildren lingered, unsure. They looked at me through the window, their expressions vacant. None of them had the courage to knock. I closed the curtains. The sense of peace that followed was profound. My house was mine again. My walls heard my footsteps. My floorboards remembered every night I woke to care, every night I lay awake with worry. The cleaning and cooking, the scarce vacations, the years of quiet toil without acknowledgement, all still lived here, in the broken tiles and the faded welcome mat. That night I stood at the window again. In the emptiness of the yard, I saw the daisies. They were wilted now, offered, then discarded, like me. But the seeds lived in my memory. They came home, hoping I would welcome them. Instead, I welcomed myself. I still feel sad sometimes, because love is complicated and loss can hurt. But I also feel something else. The ease of being grounded in your own choices, your own dignity. I did not unwrite the past. I simply wrote the ending I deserved. And if they wish to forgive me, they must first learn to see me. But they cannot knock, because the door has closed. I live now in a modest stucco home, just outside the desert town, where Joshua trees reach toward wide Arizona skies. My front porch has no grand view, just sandy gravel and the occasional tumbleweed, but I like it that way. It is quiet, it is mine. Inside, I have a small cactus garden near the window, wide enough for morning sun. I spend hours tending them, verifying each plump stem, wiping dust from the pot rims, watching as new blossoms form in delicate greens and yellows. I adopted a calico cat named Joanne, her fur patterned like the southwest sunset. She follows me obediently, curling at my feet when I read and purring at night. One afternoon, a little girl named Mia from 2 houses down knocked. She stood shyly, holding a battered notebook. She looked up at me, eyebrows knitting in curiosity. "Grandma Megan," she said, "can I ask you something?" I nodded. Her voice was soft. "Do all moms get to go to Vegas like my mom took her mom?" I smiled, picking up a fresh-cut cactus flower and holding it out for her to smell. "No, sweetheart, you do not have to go to Vegas to be loved. What matters is not being left behind. A mother's worth is not measured in trips." Mia nodded and sat beside me as I explained how I lost my birthday celebration and how I found my way back instead of chasing a fantasy I never wanted. She stared at me, then said, "I hope my mom never forgets me like that." I hugged her and said, "Then tell her stories. Make sure she hears them." She left, clutching the cactus bloom, leaving a trace of innocence behind. That evening, I opened my mail to find dozens of handwritten letters. Women from Florida, New York, Michigan, Oregon. They all told similar stories. Mothers forgotten, abandoned, overlooked. One woman from North Dakota wrote, "Your story gave me permission to say no." Another in Virginia wrote, "I brought my grandma to her birthday this year, even though she's old and boring." Their words felt like soft rain on weary roots. I answered as many letters as I could, just a line or two. "You are not alone." Each letter fueled something inside me. It made me feel seen beyond my own front door. I continued writing in my journal each night. Yesterday I wrote, Today I planted 10 cactus starts donated by a neighbor. I planted them in a circle because families, like cacti, can grow strong when their roots support each other. I also built a small website for the Forgotten Mothers Fund, dedicating it to mothers left out of celebrations or robbed of dignity. It's modest, a photo of me holding daisies at 80, the story of my birthday alone, a short tribute to mothers everywhere. Donations trickle in slowly, but sometimes a check arrives with a mother's name and a thank you note, like, "For my mom, still strong at 93. My days go like this now: sunrise and tea, tending plants, answering mail, writing. Afternoon walk with Joanne, supper made simply, rosemary chicken or lentil soup depending on the day. I sleep early. No regrets, no illusions, just peace. Tonight, the desert sky is open and scattered with stars. I sit on the stoop with Joanne on my lap. The air is cool. In the distance, headlights flicker along the highway, some heading to Vegas. I watch them and feel a gentle ease in my chest. I do not regret staying behind. I've learned that life's worth is not decided by neon lights or extravagant gestures. It is measured by who shows up. I've learned that owning your presence is stronger than giving up your absence. I've learned that love without acknowledgement is just an empty promise. As I scratch Joanne behind her ears, I open a letter from California dated yesterday. It says, "I saw your story on TV. My mother was in an assisted living facility and stopped getting calls during the holidays. This year, I drove over, brought her dinner. She said it made her feel whole again. My heart swells. That is all I needed, because in honoring myself, I have reminded others how to honor their mothers too. I look up at the stars and whisper, I was forgotten once, but not anymore. And with that, I turn off the porch light, letting the darkness settle around me. Not because I am hidden, but because I am finally comfortable with being seen in my own quiet. I no longer seek the applause of Vegas lights. I have my garden, my feline, my stories, and a world that hears me. I don't need my children around me to feel complete. I don't need apologies whispered through a closed door. What I want is simple, not to be folded away like an outdated photograph, tucked behind newer, brighter memories. Yesterday I stood on a small sand dune outside my house. I wore a dress I had sewn years ago, linen with a floral print that reminded me of spring mornings. The sun was dipping low, desert's blood orange. I closed my eyes and lifted my face to the breeze, feeling the warmth on my cheeks. I had Joanne curled around my ankles and the desert stretching out before me, endless, open, and mine. A neighbor came by and snapped a photo. No fuss, no announcement. Just me, grounded in the earth, wind tousling my hair. For once, I wasn't cropped out. I was in the frame, whole, not just part of the scenery. And that image, me, smiling, standing tall on a dusty hill, became my graduation of sorts. Not from life, but from invisibility. I wrote in my journal that night, I spent 80 years building a life visible only to those who cared enough to look. Now I stand open and unhidden. I deserve the air I breathe, the ground I walk on, the dignity I hold in this smile. I'll tell you this, I have no ill toward Vegas. I have no need to visit or relive those neon illusions. My heart beats to a different rhythm now. Cactus blossoms, tea at dawn, letters from women who found strength in my story. Not long ago, a friend sent me a quote, "Do not go where the path may lead, go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." I kept that written on my fridge, because I didn't need their applause, I needed their awareness. And mine. People called me the grandma who stood her ground, but I don't see it that way. I just see a woman who refused to be erased. And so, here, on this red sand, with cactus and sky, I choose the story I deserve. I choose presence over absence. I choose quiet dignity over hollow celebration. I choose not to be a legend to be whispered about once a year, but a person to be remembered every day. If you've ever been the one folded behind the scenes, the one erased for convenience, hear me when I say, you are not invisible. Your seat is not empty unless you let it be. I did not need my family's approval to exist. I needed only to stand in my own truth, and that is enough. Thank you for listening to my story. If it reminded you of your own mother, or the grandmother you wish you'd understood better, or the silent strength of a woman who gave everything and asked for nothing, then I invite you to stay a little longer. On this channel, Grandma True Stories, I share the truth they tried to bury, Stories of betrayal, quiet revenge, and the power of remembering. Not loud, not bitter, just true. So if you believe that wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers, and that revenge has no expiration date, then hit that subscribe button. There are more stories waiting to be told, and this grandma isn't done speaking yet. Thank you for listening, and never forget, the quietest woman in the room remembers everything.